Okay, we want to find all the zeros and sketch a graph of this polynomial, right? So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to list our p over q, right? So if we do p over q, remember p is the constant and q is the leading coefficient. So the 102 is the factors or the p value. So we're going to do plus or minus 1, 102, and then if we take 102 and we divide it by 2, then that gives us 51. So 2 and 51. And then if I do 102 and I divide by 3, then I get 3 and 34. And then if I do 102 divided by 4, that doesn't work. 5 won't work. 6 will work because 2 and 3 go into it. So then we get 6 and 17. 7 won't go into it. 8 won't go into it. And we keep going up all the way until we get to 17, which these are our only factors. So then we have over the q, which is plus or minus 1, right? So then if I take all of the top ones and divide by the bottom one, it's really just plus or minus 1, 2, 3, 6, 17, 34, 51, 102. Right? Remembering that the plus or minus goes to each one of them, so we're just shortening it instead of doing plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 4, or not 4, sorry, 6, plus or minus 17, right? Because that gets annoying, so we can do that. Okay. So then we're going to go to our calculator. So I've got my Desmos here. I already put it in. On your Desmos, notice you can do like your pinch and zoom kind of thing so that you can see different parts of that. And notice here you can just touch and it will tell you that these are your x-intercepts. So notice the 3, 0 is the one that matches. It crosses at 3, so notice here it's a little bit before the 7 and a little bit before the negative 5. So the 3 is the one that's on our p over q list. Right? So I'm going to synthetically divide by 3. So we've got 3, 2, 1, none. So it's just taking the coefficients. So 1, negative 5, negative 28, 102. Bring down the 1. 3 times 1 is 3. Add straight down. So that gives us negative 2. 3 times negative 2 gives us negative 6. So we add straight down. So if we do negative 28 plus negative 6, that gives us negative 34. And then if we do negative 34 times by positive 3, that gives us negative 102, and we get 0, which we should be expecting because we saw that it was an x-intercept. If I don't get an x-intercept, you messed up on your math somewhere. You either picked your x-intercept wrong or you did some of your arithmetic incorrectly. So that means that I'm going to take what we have left over. So 1x was a cube, so I'm going to a squared minus 2x minus 34, and we're still setting that equal to 0. Well, if I go to factor, we want to multiply to negative 34 and add to negative 2. We've got 1 and 34 and 2 and 17. Well, neither of those work, so I can't factor it, which means, hopefully you remember, you have to use the quadratic formula, which we reviewed already. So the quadratic formula, remember, is x equals, you can sing your song, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Right? You should have this memorized. If you don't, memorize it. Remember, the b is the thing with the x, the a is the thing with the x squared, and the c is the constant. So we're going to do negative 2 plus or minus the square root of b is negative 2 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1 times c, which is negative 34, all over 2 times a, which is 1. So then we just have to finish simplifying this, which is not our favorite thing, but it's still fine. So our negative turns into a plus, so positive 2 plus or minus negative 2 squared is 4. And then I like to do the 4 times the 1 times the 34. And then I look at my sign, so negative times negative gives me a positive, so it'll be plus 136. So then I do 4 plus the 136, which gives me 140, over 2 times 1, which is 2. So if we break down 140, so I'm going to kind of break down the 140 sideways. So we've got 14 and 10, This is 2 and 7. This is 2 and 5. So notice we've got a pair of 2's that can come out. So we get 2 plus or minus. The 2 comes out. The 7 and the 5 have to stay underneath because there are no pairs for them. So we multiply those. So that gives us 35 all over 2. But notice each one of these has a 2 in it, right? So we can divide each of them by 2. Right, so 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 2 once. So this gives us 1 plus or minus 1 root 35 over 1, which just gives us this part, right? So this is what our x equals, plus, don't forget to add your 3 here, right? So now if we wanted to write this in factored form, we could write our polynomial as f of x equals x, remember we changed the sign here, so minus 3. And then we can do the same thing with this one. So x minus 1 plus root 35. And then x minus 1 minus root 35. Right, so then we just need to distribute this negative here. So this will be x minus 3 times x minus 1 minus root 35. And x, and then this will be minus 1 and then plus root 35. So if we wanted to write it in factored form, this is the way that you could write it in factored form. Okay. And then notice here, if we write it like this, that it makes it more obvious what our multiplicities are, because each one of these have an unsaid first power. Right? So that means that the multiplicity is 1. So we have x equals 3, and then 1 plus or minus root 35. You don't have to write those separately. So the multiplicity is 1 on both of those. Move that down here. Which means that it's going to be odd and crossing. Odd and crossing. All right, so then if we create our sketch of our graph, you know I've got an x-intercept at 3. Well, I need to find where the 1 plus root 35 is. So in my calculator, I'm going to do 1 plus square root of 35. And that gives me 6.916. And then if I do 1 minus root 35, that gives me negative 4.9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so we're there. These are both crossing, and then the negative 4.9, 1, 2, 3, 4, and there. Our original equation, if we go back up, was an x cubed, which means that it's discoing since the power is odd. And then since it's positive, we're going to be increasing from left to right. So we've got that our end behavior looks something like this. If we find our y-intercept is when we plug in 0. So this, when we plug in 0 up here, goes to 0, goes to 0, goes to 0. So all of these zeros added together or subtracted together is still 0. And then plus the 102 gives us the 102. Or remember that your constant is the y-intercept. So now, on here, this is where I'm fine if you go, oh, it's positive 102, JK. And you say 102 if it's something super high or super low. Okay. If it's within 10 or 20, something that's reasonable. If it was with 20, I would scale by like 2s or 5s or something like that. Okay. So then we're going to start from the bottom left. Let's do just a different color entirely. Red is fine. So I'm going to come from the bottom left. This was crossing. I forgot to put that. So we're going to cross. I'm going to come somewhere. I need to come hit my x-intercept, or that's our y-intercept, sorry. I need to cross through here and cross through here. That kind of goes off my screen. And that gives us a good sketch of our graph.